guys, and welcome back to my channel. You're probably wondering, Rachel, where are the vlogs or what is this? Because I don't think I've made a sit down video in the longest time. And the reason I'm making this type of video today instead of a vlog is because I feel like the last couple of months I've been churning out vlogs and I haven't really been chatting about my life, what's going on with me. And I feel like my old content, aka 4 or 5 years ago, it was very much me sharing my struggles, us communicating, talking, and going through life together. Obviously, people can be private, and I feel like the last year and a half, I've been really taking on this like private vibe to my life. And I still post, obviously, but I just feel like I was holding back because I was just a bit more concerned about what people thought of me, even though I had like multiple times where I was like, I should keep this to myself. And then I've come to the realization by sharing certain stuff in my real life, in work, with friends, we end up like connecting, and it's really important to discuss things that people are going through because then everyone realizes they're not alone. And that is why I've decided to make this series where I sit and chat and we just have a conversation, and you get to learn more about me, I get to learn more about you, and we just go through our mid to late 20s together. And I feel like every second podcast now is like that. It's like, oh my God, my 20s journey. I'm not putting that as this, but this video is about the stuff that I'm going through right now. And I just happen to be 26. So for my first video, by the way, this is like a series. It's called like the Cozy Club. So that's why I'm like on my bed. It's very chill. I haven't fine-tuned the audio, the video, etc. So please bear with me as like I get my head around it. But the first thing I want to talk about on this new series of the Cozy Club pod or Cozy Club podcast, even though this will just be online and on YouTube for the first while, I don't feel the need to pop anything on Spotify. But the first thing I want to talk about is something that I've known for a long time, and I actually got the diagnosis 2 years ago, and I just never spoke about it because I was like, this is a personal, private matter and I don't need to share it. And now I feel like I do need to share it because I see it constantly with my friends and work colleagues, and we talk about it, and everyone is like, wow. So, my big announcement is I have ADHD, and I got diagnosed in 2021 after many years of thinking I had dyslexia, if I had some sort of learning disability. And yeah, I got diagnosed with ADHD. I went privately. I tried to do the public route, but the waiting lists were just like crazy. And I remember I called my doctor to try like sort it out, and it wasn't my doctor, it was like some random doctor that was in. And like I burst into tears on the phone because it was still in the midst of COVID, so I wasn't allowed to have an in-person appointment, and that was a disaster. I remember I was so angry and I was just, my emotions were everywhere. And then a few months later, I rang again about like getting on a waiting list, and that doctor was really supportive, and he sounded young on the phone, and he said that it sounded like I had researched ADHD a lot and I was quite sure that I did need this assessment, but he couldn't promise me an assessment time due to the waiting lists. So I contacted a psychologist in Carlow, and then I was put on a waiting list for I think 6 months. So actually I got put on the waiting list in 2020, and then it was a 6 month wait, and then I got assessed and found out I have ADHD, and I've known this since 2021. And honestly, knowing I have it hasn't changed anything really for me, but it was just a reassurance that I knew, because I was convinced I had a learning disability like my whole teenage years. I knew there was something, and I just couldn't figure out what it was. So just to get it out of the way straight away, because if you're watching this and you think you've ADHD, or you're just interested in the whole area of private mental health in or healthcare in Ireland, the assessment with a psychologist, which isn't a psychiatrist, so I can't get diagnosed medication with this person, which I had no issue with. I wasn't looking for a prescription, but the cost of the assessment, this is actually insane to say it out loud, but because I was on the waiting list for 6 months, I did save, was €900. €900, which is just wild. And I've seen people post online about like different people up in Dublin that can assess you and give you a diagnosis in like 2 hours, and it's like €300 or whatever. That's fair enough. My assessment was like a full morning. It started at I think 9:30 and it finished at 1:30, and she tested everything. Well, not everything, but like she tested dyslexia, all the like little smaller, not learning disabilities, but all the smaller pieces. Well, they're not even smaller, but you know what I mean. So like, say if like ADHD is here, and there's like dyslexia and dyspraxia and all the other things in neurodivergency. Um, I didn't get tested for autism because that's a separate test completely. But I came out of it and she was like, "You don't have dyslexia." My like reading and spelling levels were like too high for that to be it. And yeah, she just basically said that she knew immediately from me sitting down how I was acting in the chair, how I was answering questions, how I was fidgeting. And it was probably one of the most reassuring, and I don't know, I'm trying to think of what the word was. It was just reassuring, and it was confirmation of something that I'd questioned and wondered my whole life. And you get like interviewed basically. Well, I don't know what every assessment is like, but with this person, you get interviewed and you go through your childhood, your teenage years, school, college, your academics, your friendships, your relationships, how you react to different people, how you react to situations. And before I went in typical ADHD fashion, I had researched it so much, and I already figured out things that like made me a perfect person to have ADHD. But then through the assessment, there was things that I explained, and she was like, "Yeah, that's ADHD because," and I remember when I was in 6th year of secondary school, my English teacher actually, we were in class and she was giving out the essays, and at the end of it she was like, "Oh, Rachel, stay back there for a second." So I went up to get my essay and she was like, "Oh, this is really good," or whatever. That was grand. She was like, this is literally one of those core memories. She was like, "I'm just really how did she phrase it?" Oh yeah, she was like, "I'm just disappointed for you because I know your leaving cert results aren't going to be what you deserve." And I remember standing there like, "Okay." And then she was like, "The leaving cert isn't made for people like you." And I had no idea what she meant. And that's why I think I thought I had dyslexia for so long, because there was little instances like that through my education where teachers questioned how I was coping and how I was doing. Similarly, when I was in primary school, I think I was in junior or senior infants, and the school recommended that my mom get me tested. But that would have been like 20 years ago, and the classifications for ADHD and autism back then were very largely based on boys and their symptoms and experiences with having ADHD and autism. So when my mom was sent to this talk and she listened to all the symptoms and different things to look out for in the traits of a child with ADHD, I didn't match any of them because all of the reports were about boys, and I was a very sensitive, quiet child who hated getting in trouble, hated being told I was wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I had the rejection sensitivity disorder, or is that even how it's called? There's so many different like terms, but if someone even looked at me strange, I could cry. And even now, like if I get in trouble in work, or when I was in college and I got a bad result or like bad feedback, hysterical tears. And it wasn't that like I am oversensitive, but it was because of the ADHD and not being able to control my emotions and understand those feelings. And even now, if I get overstimulated or I'm agitated, or say if I get too hot or I'm just uncomfortable in a social setting, I will get so angry, and I just need like 10 to 15 minutes to like calm down, and I will be fine. But it's those instances where you're like in a fog and you can't even think straight. Like last weekend, Owen and I were going to the cinema, and I just got into this like shutdown mode where I didn't want to make a decision or even move. And Owen came upstairs to me. We were in his house up in Dublin, and I just wasn't really I wasn't myself, like, and he asked me a question and I like snapped at him. I don't even remember snapping at him, and we were doing a little back and forth, and then he snapped at me and basically told me to cop on. He didn't use those words, and because he was way nicer, and I snapped out of it, and he was like you're in a fog, and I like him saying you're in a fog honestly made me like see. I was like, oh my god, I actually am, like, I just couldn't make a decision, and then I was getting overwhelmed, and I was just like frozen. So we figured out that I was in a fog. I apologized for snapping at him. I couldn't even remember what I had said because I was just so in my head and just so overstimulated. And we hugged, and yeah, it was grand in the end. Like, he was really understanding and really nice. But in those moments, I was a bit chaotic. So, since getting the diagnosis in 2021, as I've already mentioned, it hasn't really like changed my life that much because near the end of the assessment, she was asking me stuff about like how I cope with the symptoms or the traits that I have, which is something you will see a lot or hear a lot about, especially with like ADHD or autism, where people dislike certain things and then they make like coping mechanisms, so then they don't flag that thing as an issue because they're already finding a way how to cope with it. I'm trying to think, like, say if you hate loud noises, so you then go and buy those like earphones that, or the headphones that like mute sound, so then you feel like you're coping with it, so it's not like a big issue. Whereas some people may not like cope with that, or they might not find like a solution to that problem, so then if they're going for an assessment, that's straight away like an issue. So because I had traits or symptoms of ADHD from a very young age, I had created systems, like, unbeknownst, is that even unbeknownst? Unbeknownst. If you ask me to spell that, I actually have no idea, and I feel like I'm using it in this right in the right setting. But unbeknownst to myself, I had created systems that had helped me not cure but maintain, or what is the word? Like, that's another thing. I'm gonna have to get onto my memory loss in a second, but I was able to work around my ADHD. So I'm a huge fan of journals, which is really funny because if you go back to a couple of my old videos, like one of my first journaling videos, I talk about how I have two journals, one for emotions and one for to-do lists and to keep track of things. That is basically like an ADHD 101 tip, to have to-do lists and also to have a place to like document how you feel, because the emotions can be so strong and so quick, like they're so fast acting, so it's good to have like coping mechanisms. And another thing which I think is gas, but um my Twitter bio when I first started my Twitter in like 2011, 2012, was like Grey's Anatomy lover, something something, and making lists. Like, making lists was like one of my favorite things to do, and that's literally like a way to cope with ADHD. Like, if I get up in the morning and I don't have a plan of what I'm doing or like what I want to do that day, it's like today's going to be the worst day ever because I don't have an idea of what I'm going to do next. So that's something that I do. And then as well, routines are a big thing for me. So I know I'm having like a bad mental health day or a bad mental health week if I am completely off my routine. So I explained that to her, that like routines are so key, and to get up, and those routines are basically habit stacking. So I get up in the morning, I get out of bed, first thing I do is put on my glasses, go to the bathroom, go toilet, brush my teeth, come back into my room. I've started to like air in my bed, so like I'll open the window to air out my bed, but before I would come back into my room, make my bed straight away, get dressed, do my hair, go downstairs, have breakfast. So everything was like, there was like a play by play, like everything had like a next item. Like, I would never get up in the morning and make my bed first. I would have to go to the bathroom and have to brush my teeth first. So that was another example of like habit stacking. And to like a person without ADHD, that's just like a morning routine. But to get into the mind frame of keeping it under control, you have to like make the conscious effort to do that. Another thing that I only actually recently did, but I have like a drawer of my daily medication, and I basically emptied out the entire drawer and I only put my medication in there, and I added alarms on my phone. Like, iPhone literally has a medication setting. So you can add in the dosage, little cute emojis for them, and you'll get like an alarm. So my alarms go off at 10 a.m. So that's like after I started work, after I've had breakfast. And then I also have like an evening alarm. So again, when I start my work day, I start my work day around 8:30, 9. I'll have my breakfast before 10 o'clock, get my medication. Like everything has a set place and time. And obviously, when my routine gets thrown off, it can be the worst thing in the world because I feel like I don't have control. But when it does go right, it is great. And the last year when I was traveling, I like made a routine list of things I needed to do when I was traveling. One of those things was to journal, and another thing was to buy snacks and have them in the hotel room, or excuse me, the hostel. So like I'd always make sure I had fruit on hand so I could eat that in the morning. And it's just the things I do every day that make me feel human and that I have some sense of control over my life. Definitely have more things that I do, but like they're all them that come to the top of my head at the moment. And it's really funny because I literally cleaned my room like 2 days ago. There was already a huge bundle of clothes on my floor, which I am going to deal with after recording this video. So I just thought I'd go through some of the symptoms of ADHD in women and girls, and I can tell you if I tick any of them, even though it is also very personal because yeah, I'll explain that when I go through these. So women and girls can have any of these presentations, and the symptom severity can vary across their lives. So like when you have tumultuous times in your life, so when you start puberty or when you're pregnant or menopause, basically like hormonal times can also impact the onset of symptoms, especially if you think about like how insane and how intense puberty is for girls. It just makes sense. So if you imagine like a girl without ADHD going through all the emotions and hormones and then add ADHD in there, it's a bit like chaotic. So, however, both research and lived experience indicate that girls and women most often appear to have the inattentive presentation. When I actually got my assessment, I got like this like proper tick booklet of the psychologist's report on my ADHD and how it presents, and I actually think I have a combination of both. I honestly can't remember because it was 2 years ago. And when I got the book, I just like flicked through it because I didn't want to read it, but my parents read it and so did Owen. So some of the symptoms are: fails to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes. That was me all the way through school and college. Has difficulty sustaining attention, does not appear to listen, struggles to follow through with instruction. The one about attention is so true. Like I was like a number one doodler. I used to love like just drawing. That was like my favorite thing to do. Has difficulty with organization. I feel like I used to have difficulty with that, but now that I've put so many structures in place, I don't find that as difficult anymore. Avoids or dislikes tasks requiring sustained mental effort, loses things easily. The sustained mental effort, I feel like that's why I'm struggling with making YouTube videos recently, because when I sit down to edit, that is a sustained mental effort, and I'm trying to get back into the swing of things, and it's definitely like a process that I need to continue with. Is easily distracted, is forgetful in daily activities, yes and yes. Even when I'm trying to explain things, I've copped myself doing it today. Like as I record this, I'm like getting off my train of thought. To assume that women and girls only experience the inattentive presentation would be incorrect. Many women and girls report and describe internal hyperactivity and other unrecognized symptoms. Okay, this is my favorite part of this. So, you know how it says many women and girls report and describe internal hyperactivity. So, one of the things the psychologist said to me when I was having my assessment was, we were sitting there and it was after COVID, so we were behind like this glass like separation. It was like a glass wall, a window, basically a glass wall, a window, and she could see me, and she could see my hands, and she could see my feet, and she could see that under the table I was like squeezing my hands, and under the table as well my leg was bouncing up and down. And then she was asking me about like being in primary school and little things I would do. And something I used to always do in primary school, especially when I had like a skirt and tights on, I would get up and fix my tights constantly, and I didn't realize like that wasn't like a normal thing to do. And she said that was my way of like, you know how if a boy is like hyper, he might throw something, or he might, I don't know. I see. I can't even talk. I can't even say. I can't speak on behalf of boys because I don't know exactly what to do. But like, they're more disruptive in their hyperactivity, whereas my hyperactivity was walking to the bin to pair my pencil, or standing up to fix my tights, and just like little things like that. So some of these symptoms and behaviors in girls are culturally connected to very social girls. So I used to always get in trouble for talking. So talks excessively, fidgets, and often needs to get up and walk around, the tights and the pairing the pencil, acts impulsively or speaks before thinking. I still do this, which is so bad. And it's honestly, I feel like half my anxiety comes from that impulsivity and speaking before I think. Appears to daydream, but will explain that her thoughts feel like they're going a million miles a minute and she has trouble keeping her mind on one topic. Yes. Easily makes friends, but has trouble sustaining relationships. I love making friends, and I actually do that really easily. But I feel like there's difficulty sustaining friendships, not so much now, just because I am aware of how to maintain friendships. Again, that's a learned behavior. Adopts compensatory strategies, leading to working 2 or 3 times as hard as her peers in order to be equally successful. Yes, I used to like try study so much, and I think that's what my teacher was talking about. I was putting in so much effort, but I wasn't getting the same return. Fears rejection by peers or friends and clings to other people or remains in unhealthy relationships. 110%. If you remember a couple of years ago, I made a video about like having relationship anxiety, which looking back now, thank God I have all those videos to like document my journey with anxiety and stuff, because that was just my rejection sensitivity and my ADHD, which is really funny because I remember at the time when I made that video, someone like diagnosed me with BPD, which is a very common thing where girls get diagnosed with BPD instead of ADHD. But yeah, I don't have BPD, I have ADHD. So, donut often listed as symptoms. Other indicators of ADHD in girls and women include co-occurring depression and anxiety, difficult romantic relationships that can lead to intimate partner violence, trouble maintaining friendships, and at least one space in her life in disarray. So, a messy house, a messy bedroom, or a similar personal space. So, this is very true. I was so anxious, and there's a fly in my room. Hopefully he just leaves. He just flew in the window. Um, but yeah, my it's another video and I'll talk about it another time, but like anxiety, depression was very much like a real part of my life. And I remember thinking like, do I have anxiety? Like, do I actually have like diagnosed anxiety? And again, when I got my ADHD diagnosis, I was like, oh my God, the depression and ADHD and anxiety is a symptom of ADHD, which was quite reassuring. And obviously, if you have anxiety and depression, that's like its own battle. But for me to find out it was a symptom was quite reassuring. Difficult romantic relationships, I can 110% say yes, that prior to my current relationship, well, to be fair, my first, like my proper like boyfriend girlfriend relationships have been great, but all of my like dating and my situationships were the worst thing mentally. I hated it so much. And messy space. There's literally a huge bundle of clothes. Ew, the fly is on my jumper. I'm trying to think, what can I throw them? 1 second. Shite, I just hit my mirror. Anyway, my room is messy and now there's a pillow in amongst the mess. Often girls with ADHD will become sexually active at a younger age than their peers due to impulsivity, poor planning, or a desire to be cared for by their partner. That's actually so sad. And I personally don't think so, for me anyway, because I was so afraid of the guards when I was a teenager that I didn't want to like have sex or do anything until like I was a legal age. Which is so funny. Like I literally thought the guards were going to arrest me. And I feel like you could connect that back to my fear of rejection. I was afraid that the guards were going to give out to me. When they do so, they're at a greater risk of being pressured into unwanted sexual activity or becoming victims of sexual violence, and are less likely to use or be able to insist that their partners use contraception. That's actually crazy. I didn't know that one. Okay, so treatment for ADHD in women and adults. So when I finished up my assessment, the psychologist asked me, so what do you want to get out of this? Like, do you want to go down the medication route? Do you want to, like, what? She asked me what I wanted, and I said, to be honest, I just wanted to know that I have it. Like, I just wanted for my suspicions to be confirmed and to not feel like I'm constantly behind people, even though I'm trying at like 110%. And she was like, oh, that's lovely. And then she said that all of the things I'm doing would be the things that an ADHD coach would tell me to do. So there was no need to like probably go down that route. She said if I wanted to get a coach, I could. But she also recommended that I become an ADHD coach because I've navigated the last 20, well, when I had my assessment, how old was I? 24. I had navigated the last 24 years of my life, and I was doing pretty all right. So she told me I should become a coach. So if you see me doing an ADHD coach qualification, it makes sense because I feel like I am qualified to give people tips. So this website says the treatment approach for ADHD for women and girls considers their needs, stage of life, and symptom intensity, along with evidence-based medical and behavioral management. So what does this say? It says medication. So you could get stimulant or non-stimulant medications. And then it says prescribing medications for women can be more complicated than it is for men, as hormone fluctuations throughout the menstrual cycle or relation to birth control, etc., etc. Which I already knew that. I knew that it was very much linked to hormones. Behavior management for ADHD. So that's to do with like CPD, cognitive behavioral therapy, which I did a bit of when I was in therapy for anxiety a couple of years ago. Yeah, so this thing here is just basically saying medication or therapy, which honestly, like, that's like the only thing you could really do. Yeah, it says career guidance, professional and professional organizer, ADHD coaching, which I already mentioned, and something else. I'm actually going to kill that fly. Something else that is recommended is to like keep a healthy diet and to keep stress low, because as I explained earlier when I had that like mini meltdown about going to the cinema, that was related to like me feeling stressed. Oh my god, the fly literally just flew by me. My window is open, like I don't know why. Okay, I feel like I'm gonna have to go. 1 second, I'm gonna get this fly. Wait, what? Now I don't even know what way I had this. I got rid of the fly, thank god, says all of you. What was I even saying? Oh yeah. So it's important to like try control your symptoms and to try control the environments around you. And this is kind of a side note, which is very typical of someone with ADHD, but there is a girl I follow on Instagram, Becca. I'll insert her Instagram here. And she talks about she went for, I think it was like counseling or something. I'm probably getting this story partially wrong, but she's also diagnosed with ADHD, but she feels that the current way we're living increases the chances of people thinking they have ADHD due to social media, phone usage, screen time, etc. And that there's a lot more kids presenting with ADHD, and it's not because they would have had it like regardless, it's because of like screens, which I'm not saying that is true. I'm not saying I fully agree with that, but I do see what she's saying, because if a child like me was presenting symptoms when there was no such thing as iPads, I wasn't having unlimited television time. If you were the same age as me, you probably spent a lot of your time outside playing with your siblings or playing dolls and using your imagination, etc. So I do think that in the next couple of years, we probably will see a rise in children having ADHD, and that's just a lot to do with like parenting, etc. But I'm not saying that ADHD isn't going to exist in children regardless. It will, but I do think if I have kids, I'll be very mindful of that. This is actually something I talk about with my friend Charlotte a lot, that when and if we have children, we're not going to let them have screen time. Well, I'm like, I know people always say that, oh, like you say that now and you don't have kids. iPads weren't a thing like a couple of years ago. Like, I don't understand why people assume like you have to give a child an iPad, like give them a coloring book. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for my first video pod, Cozy Club pod. I'll probably come away from this and be like, I have so much more to say, but at the moment, that is what I want to tell you. I have ADHD. I've been diagnosed 2 years, and I love my life, and I love having ADHD. Well, actually, no, I don't know if I do love having ADHD. It definitely has its negatives, but I feel like it makes me who I am. And I feel like when I got the diagnosis and I kind of doubted it, and to be honest, I actually would never, at no stage was I angry or upset. And that was something that I researched beforehand. It was like, how do people feel when they find out they have ADHD or they have dyslexia or they have autism? And a lot of reports and studies say that like you go through this like resentment phase where you're angry at your parents, especially if you get a diagnosis as an adult, or you're angry at like the school or the system for not catching it. And I didn't feel any of those things. I just felt relieved that I had gotten to age 24 pretty much fine, albeit like I did have some struggles, and it was good confirmation of, to be honest, it wasn't even something I had suspected, because I didn't even know ADHD presented in the way that I had it. But yeah, that is the end of this video, this Cozy Club pod. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment and let me know what you think, because this is the first video and I will be doing more of them. I already have like a full list of videos I want to make, so I'm excited and I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in my next video. By the way, if the audio was bad, I will get better. It's going to be good. And also, this is a can from All Together Now of water, which I bought on the way out.